All right, everyone. Angela, you ready? All right, cool. Angela, why don't you come on up to the podium? I think we really only have one item on the agenda, and that is trying to figure out the appraisal contract. Mr. Walker, can you come up? Do you mind?
Testing.
We can hear you. You're good.
You said we're waiting for anyone else?
I see Corwin from the city attorney's office. Councilmember Morrell is going to try to make his way down. Mr. Walker, you can come on in. Oh, Kevin. Okay. All right. So we, just to fill everyone in on what we've been working on, and also meeting with Angela and some of the residents of the board as well.
Yeah, we do have some specific comments.
Perfect. We've been trying to move forward on hiring appraiser Chris Baker. And we have been working through the negotiations of that. Myself and the CAO have been supportive of hiring Mr. Baker. And there have been some legal issues that the city attorney's office have been trying to work through with Mr. Baker's attorney, Mr. Walker, who is here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for being here with us. We had hoped to have everything settled and signed by today's meeting. It looks like we may be close, but that apparently it hasn't quite gotten to, finalization at this point. That is how I understand things have been left. But Angela, I'll turn it over to you with any specific comments that you'd like to make as we open up.
Yes, please. I want to start by acknowledging all of the residents of Gordon Plaza and those who have preceded us. Because unfortunately, in the ancestral realm, we have members of the community who are no longer with us. And even though this fight and the allocation of the $35 million has transpired, there are some who are not physically here to benefit from the outcome of the struggle. And so we are in a serious effort today to ensure that we do everything we can to fight for Black lives while people are still among the living. So I'm going to ask, before I make these official statements, if I can just have permission from the elders to speak today.
Will the residents of Garden Plaza please stand? We, the residents of Garden Plaza, in solidarity, give you permission to speak today on our behalf. Thank you.
So I want to start by saying this. When we left on December 5th, we left with the understanding, all on the same page, that as a result of all of the communication and the necessary and justifiable scrutiny that transpired with the appraiser that was hired by the city of New Orleans through Cher Garner, that we had concerns. And those concerns had been voiced long before the appraiser was ever brought on board. There have been high concerns in recognition that if the state of Louisiana requires an appraisal for this process, that we do everything we can possible to ensure that the discriminatory practices and devaluation that have historically transpired with appraisals not happen in this process. Like there's an opportunity to name it, an opportunity to surface that there's more than one approach in terms of methodology. And this is not a traditional situation that we're contending with the residents of Gordon Plaza. We're talking about 67 properties of an entire subdivision where people still live to this day and have been fighting for decades for a fully funded relocation. So in recognition and honor that there needs to be, according to the law, an appraisal, the residents then said the only thing that they are demanding of the city of New Orleans is that they be intentional and deliberate to ensure that there's non-discriminatory practices happening. Only for November 2nd to come, and the Fair Housing Alliance drop a press release indicating that we know across the country, there have been more than enough historical examples of how situations like the one with Gordon Plaza have transpired only to leave our people without what they need to move into healthy homes of their choice. So we're saying proactively, this is in the best interest of the residents, but it's also in the best interest of the city as a whole, who says verbally that you want something else to transpire. But we're saying today that in operating in the best interest of the residents, because that's what we're here for, and we're transparent about our interest is to ensure that the residents of Gordon Plaza have their demand met for all of the money that they need and have fought for necessarily to ensure that they can move into healthy homes of their choice. They're also clear that an appraiser has to go through a process, and that amount will never meet the expectation of providing them justice, no matter what the amount is, no matter what it goes to, even if they don't like it, they understand. Even if they do like it, they understand. But the one thing that's really important for us to keep in mind at the beginning of this meeting is that when the results of the sample appraisal came back, the residents of Gordon Plaza had questions, and we spent an additional 2 months providing information, providing questions, providing opportunity for the previous appraiser, Jim Thorns, to take the feedback, take the question, and just reevaluate his work. He indicated that he would do so, and the next meeting, we did not see him anymore at all. But we don't have any indication that even after all of that scrutiny, that the city of New Orleans released him from his contract. But neither here nor there, because we don't have time, not then and not today, to battle with the city about the ways you continually make choices. We are here today to say that we need the choices going forward to ensure that the residents of Gordon Plaza are having their needs met according to their needs. They're not asking for anything that anybody in their position would ask for. As a matter of fact, truth be told, in asking for their permission, they are way more graceful than any other community might be at this time in this place. So this is our last time coming to ask about this particular thing, because clearly all the conversations have been had. There was a meeting this past Monday. There was an understanding that in the last meeting, Attorney Denisha Turner said she wanted to make sure that the amount that the appraiser, that the residents of Gordon Plaza recommended was a justifiable amount. She indicated at that time that the amount needed to be looked at again to make sure that it was within industry standards. There was a question or concern about making sure that the city of New Orleans is being fiscally responsible. And we find that when the city has a priority, there's no discussion about fiscal responsibility. There are a number of contracts that get signed, people who get paid, and we have no justification or data to support that what they have been paid is justified with the people's money. It's not the city's money, it's the people's money. But when it comes to the people and what they need, certainly there's a need to nitpick every penny, every step of the way. But neither here nor there. If we're going to open it up transparently, then let's talk about that today, because the amount that the recommended appraiser is asking for is not any more, as a matter of fact, is less than what the current appraiser, who's still on record, will be receiving. Why? Because when we examine the contract, the appraiser is being paid $600 per appraisal. The attorney is also being paid $350 per hour for all of the additional work that's required to generate the actual report. And as it relates to the reports that we have seen and what we've been able to bear witness to, we don't see how the dollar amounts are justified. But neither here nor there. We understand with the current appraiser, there was a question about if the amount would be up to par. The amount amount at this point in time is less than. Because when the original amount was offered at $175,000 for the entire subdivision of Gordon Plaza, it was a question. So when the amount went from 175, they're asking the city over and over and over again, is there a counter? What are we doing to make a determination? Is it too much? The amount is $140,000. But that $140,000 would have been paid to begin with because all that was required was transactional processes. The only people who would be getting paid today would be Chris Baker or whoever the appraiser would be, or Bayou Title, whoever the title company would be. That's the only amounts we would be talking about. So let's break down those dollars. If we're talking about $140,000 for 67 properties, and we're going to talk about the number 67 because apparently that number is swimming in the air and we need to talk about it. If the number is $140,000 and you have 67 properties at $600 a piece, and you subtract that amount, and you look at $350 per hour, you're giving Chris Baker approximately 4.5 hours of work to do per household, which should be more than justifiable because we asked, was Jim Thorne's even doing 4.5 hours per work per appraisal? Because we don't see the evidence of that. What we're not going to do today is scrutinize Chris Baker because he's come to the table with all of the credentials, all of the qualifications several times over. What we're not going to do is come here and nitpick these dollars and cents because CAO Montano said the dollar amount is not the problem. It's making sure that the contract and the details are up to par and in alignment with the law. There has not been one thing that we have said or heard that has brought up a question about whether or not this can be done according to the law. As a matter of fact, if there's a question in the air about the idea that the former appraiser has already done some appraisals, and the argument today is, let us subtract the amount of appraisals that he's already done, here are the questions we would ask of you. Number one, even if there was a resident who was hesitant about going forward with this entire process because they've been lied to, denied, and put on delay for 41 years, they should have the right and the opportunity and the access to change their mind before these appraisals are complete and before the money is distributed. And this is that time. Second of all, if there are questions or concerns about the work that the former appraiser has done, why would the city of New Orleans want to take that chance and not give them the opportunity to have Chris Baker do the appraiser? We're not even saying that every single resident may want Chris Baker to do the appraiser. It is their choice in the name of their decision-making process, and we understand that. But everyone also knows that this entire fight has been about making sure that all 67 property owners and people who are connected to those properties, whether they live there as a family member, renter, or such, has access. So when people make their own decisions on the side about they shouldn't have to do, we shouldn't have to include, here's the thing. You can rest well tonight knowing that this is a fiscally responsible decision. Why? Because even if Chris Baker gets paid the entire amount of the 140 for the entire subdivision of Gordon Plaza, and he comes in and doesn't have to do about 10, 15, 17 of them, you know why it wouldn't matter? Because the dollar amount would still have him earning less than what's possible for Jim Thorne's. On the record, it indicates that Jim Thorne's has, you know, they said he's done some work, he's done some appraisals. How many appraisals? We can go back 8 meetings from today, and people were saying people have already been given offers, they've accepted offers, they have not. The conversation around those appraisals for the people who are not sitting here and the people who have actively said that they're interested in a fully funded relocation, here's what we know. We know for a fact that that kind of back and forth is why the residents of Gordon Plaza don't trust y'all. That's number one. And number two, because those letters were already sent out from Cher Garner and never retracted, of course you guys got some calls from some people because people are like, oh, the appraiser's coming. And then number two, we understand that appraisers can generate lots of information and data on properties, without necessarily doing a full appraisal and be ready to drop them at any given time at any given place. All of those appraisals that have supposedly been done also have accompanied offers that have not yet been accepted. So it means that people are still thinking about things and they should have the right. And there's nothing involved in this process that should deny people the right. And if they truly do not want to engage in this process, then they won't. If they do not like the appraisal that Chris Baker gives, then they won't move on it. There is nothing that stops this process from moving forward. And I also want to say that we're here today because this was all brought up on December 5th, nearly 40 days later. We want this contract to be resolved today, and we want it to be signed today and moving forward. And Chris Baker has indicated that if he needs to sign it electronically, he will do so. So we're trying to understand what else needs to be talked about today, because we know that there's work to be done, and Chris Baker has said that he'll do it within a designated amount of time. What else is there to talk about today? Because we're not here to be litigated. And that has been the theme of this process, that kind of antagonism. There's a natural antagonism that the city doesn't always share the same interests that the residents do. But in this case, the residents have been fighting for years. The city has benefited from the ideas of Black women in the Deep South that have been saying for decades that the city of New Orleans should start using natural resources. So the solar power that we're talking about, this is not a new idea. It's just an opportunity that the city has to do the right thing by the residents of Gordon Plaza. So the only thing we really want to know today is where's the contract and how can it get signed today before we leave this place?
All right. And
So that's issue number one. Once you get past that, then we can get to all the other things that we've already been working on for the last 2-3 weeks.
I think I can help find us a path toward that by asking a couple of questions. And this is to the city attorney's office. So, there's been a lot of conversations about numbers and costs and what is too expensive and what's right and what's wrong. And it's constantly been said that Mr. Thorne's numbers were appropriate for the city to contract with. So let me go through with you all Mr. Thorne's numbers and the work that he has done. How many appraisals did he complete?
From what I'm told, it's between 8 and 10.
Okay, 8 and 10. So I'll go ahead and take the 8. Okay, so if he did 8 appraisals, okay, he did 8 appraisals at $600 a pop there. So that comes out to $4,800. Okay. So in the meetings that we had, and there were several Gordon Plaza members who were part of the meeting that we had with Mr. Walker and Ms. Denisha Turner, Ms. Meehan, Ms. Rainey was there, Angela was there. It was stated by Ms. Turner that he also completed 80 hours of consulting at a rate of $350 an hour. So that is roughly $28,000 in consulting. That now brings it to a total of $32,800 for appraising 8 properties, which then puts it at a price of $4,100 per appraisal, twice as much as what Mr. Baker is currently asking for. So I say the gratuitous contribution was actually to Mr. Thorne's and not to Mr. Baker, where we'll get actually better work at a cheaper cost. So for those reasons, I would like to move forward with this contract and get this contract finalized today. And I believe that we should be there.
Thank you so much for your comment. What I can say, based on the information that has been shared with me, with the team in the legal department that has worked very closely with this process, is that the work that Mr. Thorne's did beyond the appraisal should be separated from the actual appraisal itself. Whether that's market surveys, other research in order to get to the actual, to support his findings for the appraisal itself should be two different things. I understand your math. It makes sense to me. But again, the issue, we come back to what is reasonable in this marketplace. And so to the extent that we can get closer to a number that we can justify, then we're all for it. The issue too is that we want to always ensure that this process is protected from attacks from people, anyone who may have an interest in the outcome that may be looking at this process. We want to make sure that this goes forward. We want to make sure that we've done our due diligence to ensure that if we come upon attack, if anybody decides they want to take a more critical look at this process, that we've done everything right, because we too share the
Mr. Hill,
opinion.
I 100% agree with you on that. And that is why so many felt that that one form, which by the way, some feel it's outdated too, that one form that was being provided by Mr. Thorns was not sufficient, that these full reports that Mr. Baker would actually put forward would be much more substantial and have much more credibility should we ever be attacked.
Can I add
potentially.
something?
Go ahead,
much
Councilmember
more- Much
Morrell.
more basic. I have a lot of friends in the appraisal business. And $600 per appraisal is a very expensive cost per appraisal if you're talking about bulk appraisals. I want to reiterate the fact that, and this is no, believe it or not, this is not throwing shade upon Mr. Thorne at this moment, but the reality is this was not a low bid contract when you hired Mr. Thorne, correct? The no bid contract.
Through our council.
I get it, but when you talk about, if we're going to talk about the optics and we're trying to make sure it's defensible, then how did we start with a no bid contract to begin with? Because even if, I mean, and to be clear, I am not, for better or worse, I am not a proponent of low bid contracts. You get what you pay for. That's what low bid contracts get you. You pay somebody pennies, you get penny work, but the idea that somehow the optics don't look right, the fact that we hired an appraiser with a no bid contract with arguably what is already a high cost for appraisals, I don't see how the argument wasn't made then that if we're going to do, if it's about sunshine and rainbows, why wasn't there an RFP for a no bid, for a low bid or a best bid contract if the concern was the optics and how we ended up with this contract? And to the council vice president's point, if the goal in hiring Mr. Thorne was to get expertise and to do it quickly, the exact same argument could be made for Mr. Baker.
Thank you for that. Here's what I'm just told by Mr. St. Raymond, who's worked very closely with this process, that it did in fact go out for RFP, and Mr. Thorne's firm was the only one to Chair Garner, excuse me, Chair Garner was the only one to.
I'm not talking about Sheer Garner. That's a contract for legal services.
Right, but Chair did a subcontract with.
Okay, and did Sheer go through an open procurement process to obtain Mr. Thorne?
Chair Garner is a private entity.
Okay, well, using that logic, because if that's your logic, that Sheer Garner as a private entity could do what they think was best and could circumvent low bid, best bid, whatever, and that survives public scrutiny, then what is the problem with Mr. Baker using that same logic?
What Mr. Baker has proposed is $140,000 to appraise 67 properties for which the owners may not want to be appraised. That is not the contract that Mr. Thorne has. The Chair Garner has been issuing correspondence to the residents requesting whether or not they want their property appraised. Should the resident respond and ask for the property to be appraised, Mr. Thorns performs an appraisal and produces an appraisal report. Mr. Baker has proposed that he's going to appraise 67 properties, whether or not the owner wants the property appraised or not, whether or not the owner wants to sell the property or not, and he's going to produce a report without potentially, I guess, there was a question that Mr. Baker put forth about pictures being taken by Mr. Thorne, whether that was a drive-by appraisal.
That's not accurate.
That's not it.
That's not
Correct.
accurate.
His report cites to the fact that
That's
Mr. Thorne's
substantial.
appraisal doesn't have pictures. Also, finally, if the resident wishes to not have the property appraised, how is Mr. Baker going to perform an appraisal on a piece of property for which he can't even take exterior photographs of? The entire back end of the property could be blown out and it could be a cave.
We're obligated to pay Mr. Thorne tens of thousands of dollars already for 8 appraisals. Yes or no? It's a yes or no question because I mean, the thing is this, what you're looking at is 2 different contracts. And Mr. For
Yes.
additional work.
Yes.
Okay, does he have to get pre-approval for that?
Yes, just like Mr. Thorne's.
So did Sheer Gardner or did the city attorney give pre-approval for 80 hours of separate work? Who authorized that?
Chair Garner authorized the work, and
Okay,
the work that is authorized and is approved has to be approved by the city also.
did the city attorney or Sheer Garner counter to say, Mr. Baker, are we in a position that we will pay the agreed upon amount per appraisal that's agreed to? Or did the number shock the conscience so much that you didn't get that far?
No, the offer that was transmitted this afternoon to Mr. Baker was, Mr. Baker, you can enter into an agreement with Share Garner to perform appraisals at $2,000, $2,087 per house that's appraised. In order to complete the appraisal, Mr. Baker would have to receive consent from the owner in order to conduct the appraisal.
We can speak to
The
that.
rubbing point is that Mr. Baker has said this is non-negotiable. He wants $140,000 for 67 appraisals, and that's it.
Clearly, it
It's
is negotiable.
67 or not.
Hang on, hang on.
It started at 175 and then you pinched it down to 140. Clearly, it was negotiable.
Hang on, Angela, and one more thing to point out on the additional, you talked about the additional fee for consultation. Mr. Baker, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Walker, from everything that I've seen, he's willing to do all inclusive at 140. He never asked for this additional $350 consultation fee that is now in this letter.
No, ma'am, he is not.
So you all put the additional $350 consultation fee in this letter. That was never requested by Mr. Baker. He said $140,000 all inclusive, which is not what was in the Thorns contract.
The problem is that if we can't get 67, let's just say, I mean, I've yet to hear from the residents of Gordon Plaza how many people want their homes appraised. And that would certainly help with the negotiation with Mr.
Hang on, hang on,
I'd like to speak to that.
hang on, 1 second, hang on,
Yeah.
hang on. Wait, 1 second. Important question here, I think, that my chief of staff just brought up. Is there a cap on Mr. Thorne's contract?
The cap is his fee.
Okay.
So in other words, 67 properties at $600, do the math. If you want us to tell, if you want us, if you would let,
Condescending, do the math. Well, let me just tell you that.
I'm
if I
not-
Do the math on 80 hours of outside work on fees. I mean, that he's getting on consultation fees. How am I going to do the math of all these additional extra hours that he could put on? What I'm
If-
saying
But,
is
but,
that,
but there's something even more basic.
but there's
if-
no, we
if-
have a cap of 140 right here with Mr. Baker. There's no cap with Mr. Thorns. He could blow right past that.
But even more basic, if Mr. Thorne has appraised a house and a resident or the council says that appraisal is incorrect and he has to reappraise that house, is he going to eat the cost of that?
I imagine so. Yeah. I mean, why would,
Is that in his contract?
No.
well, that is when he submits his bill has to be reviewed by the city. So if there was a problem with the work product and we wanted to,
His contract, as I understand it, is per appraisal. When he gives us an appraisal, that appraisal is complete. I will tell you, because I've dealt with appraisals in the real estate market, if you decline to use an appraisal that is completed and you say, this appraisal is incorrect, and they go, no, it's not, and I want a new appraisal, they charge someone to do another appraisal, because from their perspective, if they have to go back and redo all the work on the appraisal, that is a new appraisal. If your contract doesn't specify, I'm having like flashbacks of road, home, and ICF. If you don't specify in the contract, any appraisal error has to be corrected at your cost. That's a new appraisal, and you're going to get a new bill for a new appraisal, because if the contract doesn't specify that if a reappraisal is necessary, you have to eat the cost. If I were Mr. Thorne's lawyer, and he obviously had a decent one, he's going to say, oh, nope, new appraisal, $600 more. If that's not in the contract, then it's an assumption. And we are all lawyers, and we are told in law school what you could do with assumptions that aren't in contracts.
We would like to move forward with this because the amount of this contract for Chris Baker is less than the amount of money that's already been calculated to this day owed to Mr. Thorne's, and there is no time limit on his contract. He can be sitting around doing research right now and charging the city of New Orleans right now, and that would be a part of his contract right now. We are ready to move this process forward, because the good news, and I want you to note this, CAO Montano, because I know you have accountability for your job, is that once this $140,000 is established, this contract is done, Chris Baker can begin his work. The residents can sleep well at night knowing that an appraisal is getting ready to be done. And in addition to that, if there is a resident, and this is something that the residents of Gordon Plaza have been adamant about from the beginning, that along this journey, if there is a resident who says, you know what, I'm good on this process, I don't want to go forward, there has been no problem with that, because each individual person is their own. However, it's also been very evident that over the course of this entire journey together, the residents have been getting information from all kinds of different sides in regards to the city that gets people to say, we don't know who in the city we can trust. But here's what we do know. Here's what we know. The answer has been nobody. But collectively in this space, people have demonstrated over the course of time, if they are moving the issue forward, stagnating, or moving it backwards. Everybody is demonstrating in these chambers what side you're on. So we are asking people today, with this back and forth about people's opinions about how this needs to get done. Right now, we have some residents of Gordon Plaza who could not be present today. This is a fight for their lives. But you know why they're not present? Because they're at another funeral for a resident. Ms. Consuela should be able, her relative should be able to say, today, a contract's being signed. But you know where the other residents are? At a funeral. Today. That makes it number 13.
Councilmember Morrell.
I just want to,
This is so disrespectful.
Angela, make me just get one comment in, because this is the basic logic that is stupefying me right now in this moment. It has been established that the city of New Orleans cannot purchase a home without an appraisal. That is, everyone's in agreement there. That's where we're all at. All right. So regardless, the position the city attorney has taken is that, what if these individuals in Gordon Plaza don't want an appraisal and we have to pay for it? Here's the issue that I have fundamentally with that. We have all agreed, the people that are in this room from Gordon Plaza, the people that are on this dais, that we want to get Mr. Baker to do these appraisals. If he goes to a household and they decline to have their home appraised, whether we pay him or not, the city of New Orleans cannot purchase that home. Which means if we're going to offer to pay for an appraisal to spend $2,200 for an appraisal. That individual says, I don't want my home appraised. And the city of New Orleans chooses not to purchase it because that appraisal is not done. The city of New Orleans has saved probably $350,000. So if basic logic says that in a worst case scenario, that if we pay for Mr. Baker to appraise homes and people choose not to have an appraisal, we can't buy the house. So either way, the city comes out ahead. Either way, that's basic logic. If they don't want an appraisal, we can't buy the house. If we can't buy the house, we've paid a $2,200 fee to not pay for a house that we set aside money for. I mean, I'm sorry, but I guess on a very basic level, there seems to be significant agreement from everyone up here that we want to move forward on Mr. Baker. And I'm going to tell you, I am really surprised by how upset the city attorney is over $140,000 when we signed a multi-million-dollar contract with a law firm that we never should have hired. Because had we just hired an appraiser, it would have cost 150 grand versus up to $2 million in legal fees.
If I might add, council member, with all due respect, as a Louisiana state MAI certified appraiser, Mr. Baker has the right and ability to appraise any property in the state of Louisiana with or without the permission of the owner. The city should want a cohesive valuation of all 67 properties. That is what he's offering to the city and to the residents. If the residents choose not to use it, then they can use another one or whatever, but it would make sense in Mr. Baker's opinion and in mine that you have a cohesive valuation across the board. That's what he's offering in his contract.
Mr. Walker, what are the simple language changes necessary in the letter that would satisfy your client's needs on that $140,000?
I sent it over to Sheer Garner today at about 2:15.
And what was the most recent response that you received?
I have not checked my email since 3 o'clock, ma'am, but let me see. Give me a moment, please. Operate the machinery. The last email I received was that it was the email from Ms. Fishman with her changes. And I sent over, with my apologies, several emails, but my last was at 2:55 PM. I've not received any comments since.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to find it too.
I have a copy here.
Andrew, can you grab that copy for me real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, so this piece says a total fee of $140,000, approximately $2,089 for each property appraised by ARC, and ARC will appraise up to 67 properties. That's the correct language?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can we get to agreeing on this language, Mr. Hill?
I think we're closer than we have been. And what I'd like to do is meet with the city attorney so that we can talk with
The city attorney,
Walker.
is this not the
And-
city attorney right here? Or are you only talking about Denisha Turner? Because let me just name this. If a conversation has to happen, we are demanding that that conversation happen now. And if Ms. Denisha Turner is for whatever reason not available, we will wait. Because this needs to be done today.
Mr. Hill,
This back and forth
hang on 1 second. Hang
is
on.
what we're talking
Hang on
about.
1 second. So, Mr. Hill, the city attorney works for both the administration and works for the city council. We are both your clients, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Montano, do you agree with moving forward with paying the fee of $140,000 for these properties?
I mean, I think the position has always stayed the same, at least from my, I think our position has never changed as far as ensuring that the residents have the opportunity to use a appraiser that they trust. We as a city are most important, at least from my perspective, that the appraisal stands the test of any kind of potential scrutiny or litigation as any other licensed appraiser should be able to provide. The dynamics of what is gratuitous or not gratuitous, I see them very differently. Right now, maybe than the city attorney, if one appraiser is charging essentially the same amount, just in a different way, I'm not seeing the distinction between the two. And so for all of those reasons, from the non-legal perspective, yeah, I think we should move forward. That the conclusion of things that has to happen is very logical to me. I understand what law is trying to say, but I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say that I have an official position on that. But if one person is saying they're charging the same amount, but just a different way as opposed to this way, I have a great.
Mr. Montano,
And-
Council
and if I-
President,
if
hang on 1 second. Council President Morrell, you all know my opinion already. I've stated it already. I think we should move forward with this due to the fact that I actually think it's probably going to end up being cheaper than if we would have continued with Mr. Thorne's. Do you agree with paying this $140,000 and moving forward with the appraisal as the president of the New Orleans City Council?
Absolutely.
Okay, so both of your clients are asking you to move forward with this contract as is. So asking you to move forward and to get that done today and send the copy to Mr. Walker for signatures.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Madam Vice.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. For CAO, Montano, Council President, Council Vice President, we are asking before people depart this room that we can work this out. The residents would like to see that contract before we leave this room. And we understand that you all have had the police officers called on us twice in the past.
Show you the contract.
But we're telling you today that we don't care if you have to call the police. We want this done today. And if we have to stand here and wait, then we will, because it makes no sense why a contract that has already been drafted, redrafted, and drafted again cannot just be signed. Chris Baker has also indicated that he's willing to sign it electronically. So we need to make this happen before we leave the room today.
Well,
And whatever you have to do, because we still have some other things we need to talk about real quick to make that happen, we'll wait.
The contract that they're supposed to be signing is right there.
I didn't see them take it when they walked out, though.
They already have it.
they
emailed.
have
They
it.
have a copy?
They have it
Okay.
electronically.
So can we ensure CAO Montano that they're coming back down? We want to ensure that they come back down with their part of the contract signed so that Chris
Thank-
Baker can move forward and do his work.
Well, I think the issue is, it's not an issue.
Mhm.
What they were just told by both their clients,
Mhm,
the Mr. Montano representing the mayor
mhm.
and myself representing the council, was they were told, go sign the contract.
Okay,
So that's
so we
why
will wait.
that-
We
well,
will wait.
That, the contract that you were given
Yes.
by Mr. Baker's representative
Yeah.
is the contract.
Yes.
So there's not a new contract they're drafting. We just told them, go sign that contract.
Okay.
So I don't know I mean, if you're waiting to get the signature.
Yes,
That,
We are. We're waiting for the signature because one of the things and problems that we have had is that there's conversations, and we appreciate those. We appreciate everything that's been said in favor of moving this forward, but there's no reason why this cannot be signed today.
Mr.
Ms. Kinlaw,
go ahead,
if
go
I
ahead.
might, I just want to make sure you understand my process. I
Mhm.
represent Mr. Baker. I am required now to go back to my office,
Mhm.
create a PDF, to send it to the city attorney, have the city attorney sign it while I have the engagement letter sent to Chris Baker for his signature. I cannot do that in this room.
Mhm.
I give you my word bond as an officer of the court that I will not stop till that is done today.
Okay, I'm gonna
And I
turn to the
must-
residents
must
of Gordon.
Go to my
Right.
office to make that
That's fine.
happen.
Let me be so clear. Let me be so clear to everybody in this room. Oh, my God. That we cannot run the risk of people upstairs, leaving this office, going somewhere. Pierre saying he's gonna do his thing. Pierre does his thing, Mr. Walker, he does his thing, and then it goes sent to somebody. What guarantee do we have from the city of New Orleans that when Chris Baker's attorney turns this around, this PF he's talking about, turns this around, that it's going to get signed? Please, I need. And what's the turnaround time and the deadline? When he submits it, give your timeline, Pierre. What's the timeline for your part?
45 minutes. I will have.
45 minutes?
Within 45 minutes, I will have the documents to both.
Okay.
The attorney, Sheer Garner, Councilmember Moreno, and Mr. Baker.
Okay.
If I leave this building now.
Okay, so if he leaves now, we'll say 45 minutes, we'll give you an hour, just in case there's traffic. We are saying that what is the timeline by the time he submits it, that the city will do their part? Because once again, that's why we're here 40 days later. We left on December 5th. People said they were gonna turn around and thing. Everybody was happy, so lucky to get us out of here. And we're here 40 days later. It cannot be, it cannot be, it cannot be. We need a declaration from the city of New Orleans on the turnaround time. We are going to be waiting vigilantly to see the contract transpire and pop up with all the signatures. We need to hear from the city. Once it's received,
Well, I think what we've said is that we've both asked and been on the same page to ask the city attorney's office to move it. I think we've both been on the same page, the council and myself, asking the city attorney to move forward.
okay.
And now it's just a matter of that translation happening and the city attorney getting with Sheer or signing it or however, what that process would entail. I'm not.
So it can be done today.
What I'm proposing right now,
Mhm.
I think dealing with attorneys, since I'm an attorney, I know how this works. What I commit to you right now is, as we're sitting here,
Yes.
I will send in writing a letter followed up with a letter saying our expectation as a city council
Mhm.
is that this letter be signed tonight.
Okay.
And I think at that point, as the client,
Mhm.
we're not giving room for interpretation.
Mhm.
And I believe that Mr. Montano will send a similar email. At that point, if our attorneys do not resolve that, they are in breach of their fiduciary responsibility. Because realize something, though I appreciate the comments that were made by the city attorney, they are our attorney and that is their recommendation.
Mhm.
They do not have the ability to not do what we request they do as their clients
Mhm.
unless they just want to quit and have somebody else behind them do the job.
Mhm.
So what I'm telling you right now
Mhm.
is that as we sit here, I'm going to send that documentation saying our expectation is by tonight,
Mhm.
this has to be done.
I
I don't know where people who need to sign this are specifically located at this time,
yes.
but that is about, as an attorney,
Mhm.
when you're given that level of specific instruction by your client to perform a task,
Mhm.
there is not a lot of room for interpretation. You're being told
Mhm.
specifically what you need to do.
Mhm. I would just like to ask, and so thank you for confirming that you will send that email while you're in this meeting. CAO Montano, can we ask you to do the same? And can we ask before you hit send that you would CC the secretary? You all have the secretary's email address from the many, many emails that you received. And so if you can include her on there, please, so that we can get receipt and the board can confirm. When they have confirmed in this meeting that that's received, all we're looking for at that point in time is a confirmation from you all that it is signed today before we all go to sleep tonight. We would all like to go to sleep peacefully tonight. Would you like to proceed with the other items we have? We just got a few.
You can go ahead and do
Okay.
that while I do
He's
that.
just, he's just checking to make.
Okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait.
No, I think we're good. He's just checking to make
Ready?
sure he had Miss Amar's contact info, which, and if you don't have it, I have it. Go ahead, Angela, with the next items.
Okay, so what we have been really intentionally and deliberately aiming to do is ensure that the residents of Gordon Plaza their demands are being advanced as it relates to moving this process forward. So there is nothing that's being asked for from the residents that does not abide by the expectations of the city. As a matter of fact, we understand such because they're the folks who've been paying the tax dollars on properties that have been toxic and hazardous. So they just coming for a return on their investment at this point. So we're looking now, as it relates to the communication about the moving expenses. So it's only gonna take a couple minutes. We understand that in our last meeting, together, Council President Moreno, I gotta switch up.
Oh, yeah, he's president.
I said, Council President Moreno, I know you look back. Okay, so we need to loop back and hear whether or not TCA has had an opportunity to look over the draft since the last task force meeting. So I'll just pause and wait.
My understanding, so as you may or may not know, at the beginning of the new year, my former chief of staff, Keith Lampkin, left to go to the DA's office. Crystal Hendon, who was my legislative director, is now my chief of staff.
Mhm,
My last communication with Mr. Lampkin last week
mhm,
was that TCA has the contract
mhm.
and they're waiting for their board's approval
Okay.
on the contract.
Okay.
That's where it's at.
So here's what we would like to make as a recommendation, if you will. In the last meeting, the residents of Gordon Plaza were able to generate questions that they had in regards to the title company Bayou title. And so we would like to request that in the next task force meeting, the TCA could come join us. And then if there are any final questions, even if there's still some logistics or processes that are going forward during that time, that there's just an opportunity to make sure that any questions that get asked, that there's clarity between the organization and the residents. We very much appreciate that any and everyone who's coming to the table to engage in transactional processes have an opportunity to actually be physically present with the residents. So when those questions are asked, they have an opportunity to respond, even if there's some follow-up. At the last Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, we asked the same thing of Bayou Title, and they agreed if there were additional questions that came up, that we could follow up with them and ask. And so we would just like to have the same opportunity to do that with TCA as it relates to this process moving forward, to make sure that the moving expenses for the movers is taken care of. So I know that that's going to be a matter of determining the date, but what we'd like to do before we leave here is establish the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting date, and then be able to see if they can make it. And if they cannot make it, that they would at least be able to respond to those questions, but our desire is for them to physically be present.
I will certainly have that conversation with them. And once we establish the date, I will endeavor to get them here.
Okay,
I typically, they are very responsive and I'm sure they can get a representative here from somewhere in TCA, but I will commit to you that when we get the date, I will go to them and try and get someone here.
okay. The next thing is, we understand, and maybe I should go to something and come back to you because I know that you're communicating. I'm going to loop back and talk about the temporary relocation funds. But now I want to say thank you, Mr. Threat, because I see you have taken your seat. I appreciate you being here in the place of CEO Montano. I don't know if there is any update regarding, and all this update was a request for information about what have been found. So I don't know if you can respond to this or not, but we are saying that if there cannot be a response today, then in this next meeting with TCA, we need a response. And we're trying to move these things forward. So at the point in time, by the time the residents get to title, all these things have been resolved. And so one of them was, we had talked about tax fees before, and we understand that it has been named in this space, the tax fees cannot be waived. But what can be waived are the fees and accumulation of costs that might be associated with those fees, so that residents don't have to pay those unnecessarily. And there was a mention that there need to be go back and see if there was anything else pertaining to that. Because what we know is that once we have that information, then it helps the residents to be able to prepare accordingly to know what it is that they need to do. the ultimate goal here is to ensure that they can move into healthy homes of their choice. So we cannot have them, you know, get to the title company, be surprised, and they're calculating this amount for their home, and now they find out they got to pay somebody $10,000, which comes from the amount that they need to move into their new home. We are working very hard to be proactive about these things so that the residents are in the best place possible. So I don't know if you have a response to that, but we brought it up in the last meeting, so we're just following up.
Mr. Threat?
Angela, I did have conversations with Norman.
Okay, can you pull up the mic just a little bit
I
more?
had conversations with the CFO about that. I
Okay,
know that for a fact, I think within law, the taxes can't be waived, but he told me it's a possibility that penalties and interest could be waived.
okay,
So I'll follow back up with him tomorrow after this meeting, and I'll
Yes.
get you an answer at our next. I'll
Okay.
get you an answer before the next meeting.
yes, thank you for that. The other one that is important, it was also indicated that when the residents get a response in regards to that, and so let's say, for example, and I'm making this up, right? Just for the sake of example, there's $100 fee and the city of New Orleans is waiving that fee. The residents of Gordon Plaza are requesting documentation from the city of New Orleans so that they don't have any problems when they get to title. But in addition to that, in addition to them getting documentation that those fees have been waived, we would like the city of New Orleans to proactively take that documentation and forward it over to Bayou Title so they already have it. Now, if Bayou Title looks brand new when they get there, then the residents will have their own documentation, but we need to cover it from both sides because we cannot run the risk, once the residents accept an offer, that there's additional delay on the back end. We are doing everything we can to ensure that there are not unnecessary burden put on the residents mentally, physically, or emotionally in this process. And so anything that we can do to eliminate those barriers, we are asking the members of the city of New Orleans who say they support the residents of Gordon Plaza to remove these barriers as necessary. We're prepared to fight accordingly. But if it's something that you can just make a determination to do or not do, we are asking that you do it to move this forward. So that's the request. We are also asking that as it relates to the process, once this contract is established and we're moving forward, that we are able to still continue and maintain forward movement around these logistical issues while the appraisals are happening. So we know that there's going to be a window of time that Chris Baker will have to do the appraisals, engage with the residents. It's going to take him some time to generate those reports and get them back. While that is going on, there's still work to be done in these meetings. And so what we're asking for, and the reason we've continued to bring these issues up, is so that we don't have to wait until the last minute for them to be resolved. There could be action taken around that. We also understand that you all attend 50 different meetings in the course of any given amount of time. So while we are here present with each other, we want to focus on the residents of Gordon Plaza and keep moving this forward so that this can be resolved. I'm going to pause here because some of the other questions that we have will be responded to in the context of what has just been named. So I want to turn to the residents now and see if there are any other questions for today that have not been addressed. One of the questions, and this is going to be the loop back for you, President Morrell, is that even though we understand that there's an appraisal process going on for the properties and the homeowners, we want to know what the timeline will be by which renters who can access their funds for what will be their housing and their payment over the course of that year, when that process can begin. And I know that there's some things that have to happen prior to that, so we'd like to just name out what they are so that we can have an idea where we're moving in that area, because we understand that it applies to both the owner and the renter, but we're just trying to see if there's a timeline around that, because then we can calculate what that means for the renters.
Well, the program that deals with relocation during the course of purchase or relocation as a renter are identical. So that timeline is going to be determined when we get the approval from TCA and when they can implement that program.
Okay, so,
But it's going to be identical for both,
got it.
and it'll be as soon as possible.
So let me just name this so that it's just stated today in publicly, is that if that timeline proceeds, the offer being accepted by the residents of Gordon Plaza, we just want to name that there may be some renters who are prepared to start their moving process. And we'd like to honor that because we understand that they're living on a toxic landfill just like everybody else. And there's no reason why they should not have the right or opportunity to access that. If it happens to proceed,
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
So basically, if for an owner, rental assistance is predicated upon acceptance of a purchase, that for renters, they should not have to wait for when all the owners have accepted. I will make
Correct.
sure that that is conveyed to TCA and we can address that in the CEA that we eventually sign with them, that make sure that those people who are not waiting for negotiating a purchase or a sale of a house, they can move immediately.
yeah, and I want to just go on record as saying that, and I'm naming that that's within the same realm of timeline for the residents. We are not setting a deadline for those people to move. We want them to have the opportunity to begin the process, because it's not going to be easy for them either to necessarily find healthy housing of their choice, considering the fact that we know New Orleans has a whole bunch of places that are open for debate about whether or not they are healthy housing. So we want to give them the room and space to be able to make decisions and not feel rushed either. And so we thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Jesse.
Do we need to come up with a
Your,
date?
Calendars for the Gordon Plaza,
Yeah,
okay.
let's do that. And then we can turn it over to Jesse to wrap us up. All right. It is the 12th of January now.
Email has just been sent, so Ms. Amar, please make sure that you have received it. It's just been sent just now. Sorry it took so long. It's hard. I got big thumbs. I apologize.
All right. What are you looking, Angela?
We're here. We're here on a Thursday. Can we return next Thursday?
Let's see. We have a council meeting that Thursday. What about the 20th, which is Friday? So in the afternoon. We could do, let's see, we could either do, what about Wednesday afternoon on the 18th?
Just before you finalize the date, I just want to name too on the side of for JP Morale that this date would also be the date that you'd be using to invite TCA.
Okay.
So I just want to,
So we could do it on the 18th after our special council meeting. We have a special council meeting in the morning. I think we start at 9, right? Okay,
We do start at 9.
so maybe we could do,
I've got a conflict, so I don't think that date's gonna work. Plus, what I would suggest is because we're trying to get TCA here, it might be worthwhile to make sure that date is a little further out, just so that
you want to
we can
try
try
like
and
the
get the game.
24th, like in the afternoon or something?
One-
No, it's not gonna work.
24th works for me, but
Or the 23rd in the afternoon.
23rd in the afternoon
yeah, we'll be.
does not work for me.
Either's fine.
Check if we can do, Angela, the 23rd, let's say 3:30.
But the 23rd does not work.
Yeah, the 23rd wouldn't work for the board either.
All right, and what happened with the 20th?
20th is
In the
Friday.
morning. Can we do the 20th in the morning? No, we can't.
It has to be in the evening
Yeah,
or afternoon like this.
I mean, So I think, so here's the conundrum. I could certainly do an earlier date, but like I said, the question is if you want TCA here,
Mhm.
I think that you're gonna have to pick a date a little further out than closer so that they can accommodate that. Because for most people who are not directly involved in this process, I can't account for their calendar.
Do you want to suggest a date?
per se. The 31st works for me.
Okay, 31st in
And-
the afternoon.
And,
30
and the 25th through the 25th, the rest of that week, I'm not available. I'm out of town.
Okay, here's what this really comes down to. And this might be a little bit more in your boat, President Morrell, is that because this process will be moving on as need be, in terms of the appraisal, that's one thing.
Right.
But in terms of this, what we're gonna really be coming for is to talk about not only where we are with this process and anything that's connected to the timelines for the relocation funds, the temporary relocation funds, and all the things that are around that. So when you name a date, I just want to make sure that there are activities happening between today and that date, so we can come back and talk about some new
I
stuff.
mean, I think if we were to do the 31st, that would be a substantial amount of time. We should have significant answers
Mhm.
on the stuff you asked. I would say this, I do think it is worth us holding an earlier date just in case we have an issue with the appraiser again, so that we can come back and have a.
We should not have an issue
We
with
should
that.
not have an issue. But what I'm saying is that, and this is I'm just putting it out there. It might be worth having a date like the 8th. I can't do, well, depending on how long the meeting is. The meeting on the special meeting on crime on the 18th, we don't control how long it's gonna run, and it could run very, 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 very long. I could do the 17th. My suggestion would be to hold the 17th date for the appraisal in the afternoon.
If you think it, listen to me, sir, with all due respect. If you think that there's gonna be a problem with this appraisal stuff, we can just sit down and wait till y'all figure out what the problem is, because I don't want to leave this room.
Well, okay,
I,
here's my position. Let's do the 31st. I will talk to TCA. I will get them here, or I will have answers to a variety of the questions you have to resolve the issues regarding the rental assistance and relocation. That is a significant amount of time where I should have much, if not all of that resolved.
I want to make it clear that if we have problems, and this is just what this is the pattern and trend you've seen, and you know this is just how it goes. If there's problems with this at all, that means we need to come back up here again. We're not going to wait until then. Like
I agree. I mean, the reality is that, and like I said, you have the email I just sent to you.
Mhm.
Samar was copied on it. We have given very clear instructions as to what our expectations are. You are 100% correct. If this is not resolved tonight,
Mhm.
there are plenty of instances between now and then where y'all can come back in any public forum and we could resolve it then.
I want to ask you if while you are sitting in this room, did you receive any communication that made you feel like there's a problem?
No,
Okay.
I'm a person who believes in Murphy's Law, and I always plan for the worst and hope for the best.
I'm with you.
So that's why.
Whereas if we need to come back here tomorrow, then let us know. We need this part.
If I get whatever response I get from the city attorney, I'm sure that you guys will see it immediately.
Okay, we are gonna be waiting tonight to hear that the contract has been signed. That's what we're looking for.
All right, so on the 31st, what time? 3:30, 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock?
4 PM.
Just put it on my calendar, 4 o'clock on the 31st for the next task force meeting.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right, and we'll have updates tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.